Great. Well, hey, Joe, welcome to another podcast. We've got a friend who's kind of moved west. From my Shotgun Eddie perspective, I'm envious. He's there, kind of defending his turf. But who do we have on the docket today that decided to leave the Queen City and go out west?
Well, we're thrilled to have Craig Richardville here with us, who is I think Craig spent 20 some years, 21 years, maybe a little bit more than that here in the Charlotte region. He's really well regarded here in Charlotte. His reputation is still very strong. You mention his name, people have a smile on their face. So he's missed here in Charlotte, and I'm sure the Denver community has recognized the asset that they have in Colorado now. As you mentioned, Mike, Craig is an incredible executive. He spent the majority of his career in healthcare. He started out in Ohio at ProMedica Health Systems in Toledo, Ohio. Spent a bunch of years there, close to 12 years there. Then he finally figured out that there's a warmer place to live and headed to the Carolinas, and he spent over 20 years at Carolinas Healthcare Systems, and then retired sometime late February of 2018. He's got his own consulting practice, like many of us do, our little side hustle through Richardville Consulting. And then he landed a really interesting gig out in the Denver area with SCL Health. And so, Craig, welcome to the podcast. I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're doing out there and what kind of attracted you to the Denver area.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for the question, and Mike, thanks for the opportunity. So, as I was looking to see what the next chapter of my life would look like, I've always been very adventurous in some of my thinking and some of my living. So to come out to the West was a new opportunity for me, a new place to learn about the area of the country, as well as how healthcare is delivered and how technology is viewed. Denver is a very progressive city. It has a lot of startups, a lot of good thinking, a lot of opportunity to take advantage of. And that's one of the things that certainly as you mature in your career, you realize that there's a lot of gold nuggets out there. It's not always the big recognizable names. You have to have some of those as your foundation, but really the separators that make you different from your competitors is really the understanding and the partnerships of some of these other companies that you could be one of the first to market to bring with you, as well as to expand on your network and continue to touch base with other leaders in the field that also bring other ideas as well as other companies to your portfolio. So that was part of the exciting thing of it. So after spending a couple of decades with one company, and the good news is for me, during that time frame and under the leadership, that company continued to evolve. And so it kept changing. So every several years, we were a different company, expanding our portfolio of healthcare providers, expanding our strategy, expanding our C-suite, bringing in or developing new talent. So it continued to evolve for me. So that's one thing that I will say. I was very blessed with having to be part of a very progressive company, and coming out to Colorado now with SCL Health, very hungry for differentiating itself and to really be, in my view, a technology company that delivers healthcare. And how do we make that maturity over time without disrupting a lot of the current processes, but understanding that there's a whole new vision of what is happening out there. So in coming into Colorado and listening to our board and to our C-suite, and many members of the C-suite were new members to SCL Health, but had all come from very mature companies. So like for myself, from Atrium, others have come from Baylor Scott and White, have come from Dignity, have come from Banner Health. So a lot of very diverse thinking of some very successful systems now coming together under one is it's almost kind of like an all-star team when I look at the people who I am privileged to work with. They are tops in their field and have come from very great backgrounds. So very blessed with that. We started bringing in certain programming. So part of the programming that we brought in was who was going to be our platform that we wanted to put a lot of our business around from the technology standpoint. Then also from a products perspective, how we're going to shift from an IT company to start to be more of a digital company. So part of the discussion that I had with the team and how we were working our strategy is we actually rebranded our division and we became ITDS. So information technology, which is very common, but also digital services, and bringing that together under one umbrella. So we're ITDS. My title became Chief Information and Digital Officer. So that evolved as well. So again, bringing the digital assets and resources into our portfolio of services that we'd be providing. We did select 5 partners that we do a lot of work with, and we have actually steering committees for them. One is Epic, which is quite large within the healthcare industry. Another one is ServiceNow. So we brought ServiceNow in last year, and they became our portfolio for system services. So we're expanding that group now in terms of not only providing IT services of how our associates interact with us, but also facilities, but also onboarding, but also human resources, also finance, also supply chain. So all those pieces now are moving into that platform that we picked. Another one that we selected is Oracle Cloud ERP. So we were a Lawson shop historically, had a lot of what I would say band-aids, other people say boundary systems or add-ons that were put around that product, nearly 100. And we went through a very methodical process with the leadership team and with the content experts, and we selected Oracle ERP Cloud, and we're in the midst now of deploying that out for our ERP system. So that's the third. The fourth one that we worked on is Salesforce. And this has to do with all of our relationship management. So we had about a dozen different initiatives over the last couple of years, different one-offs, and now we've consolidated that in under our Vice President of Digital Services, and then also started to expand into what is termed the Health Cloud, a new portfolio that they brought out several years ago. So that will give us more of a 360 view of our patients, so we understand what's the clinical aspects of that patient, what are the financial aspects of that patient, what are the campaigns that they're part of. And then the last one is Google. Rather unique that Google is a partner. They're getting into this vertical. We've been very blessed to have made that decision of that's going to be our technology partner. So we've moved to G Suite. We're moving assets to GCP, Google's cloud platform. We're also now looking to different other companies that are part of Alphabet that allows us to be able to, again, take advantage of some of that technical expertise.
That's great. So you were brave and decided to do another ERP project. I commend you for that. I'm trying to stay away from those. How's that been going?
It's actually been going really good. We went through, it was one of those things that, as you know, you do it once every 20 years. You don't swap these things out very often. You kind of ride them till as hard as you can, and then the market kind of shifts and changes. And for us, it was a kind of a double review. So we looked at not only the product that we wanted to bring in, like I mentioned, Oracle and their ERP cloud, but also the partner. And the partner was just as important as the product decision. And we picked Deloitte for that partner piece, going through a list of other potentials. So bringing both those together, and we're off to a great start. We'll be going live. We decided to do more of a big bang. Some people do certain modules at a time and a little bit more of a dimmer switch. And typically for some of our early adopter type programs, I'm actually a big fan of moving down that way. But for the way that we looked at it here and the impact that we wanted to have, we really wanted the change management to go that way and to be a big bang approach. So it's April of next year. And we have a very strong project management office that keeps us kind of on the right rails and moving toward the right direction. And then our application team is the best I've ever worked with. and they now also have their hands and their arms around all these different changes. And so now really part of our ROI is to start to remove these boundary applications or these add-ons that were bought over the years. Which ones are we going to keep, because Oracle also needs those to be able to complete the services, and which ones we're going to get rid of and start to reduce our spend because of those kinds of investments. So we're in the process of doing that, and we're several months into it. The approval was December, so we're 6 months into it. COVID, one would think, would put a kind of a damper on some of these projects or programs, but for us, actually, it's COVID is starting to teach us a little bit different ways of thinking of how we're doing things. So we just went live with a live beaker install, a 22-month project. We came in a couple million under budget because we learned how to deliver support differently, how to educate and train differently. So a lot of that virtual and a lot of that over engineering that many of us are used to in the past, you kind of stream that down and you look at the things that are truly value adds and not the icing. And the same thing we were finding with ERP. So even though many people were deflected for a period of time working on COVID and the surge that was occurring, we still progressed through and just removed what I would say is low to no valued activities, just removed them out of the program altogether. And now when we do new programs moving forward, we'll have those already removed. So I think we'll be a much more efficient organization.
Craig, I got a quick question. One of our listeners from Coca-Cola Consolidated, kind of what you're going through is they talked about, many of us are about to embark on a budgeting cycle, right? And they would be very interested in understanding how others are effectively managing agile delivery teams using, a modern budget financial model process. What are your thoughts around that as you were looking at ERP or other projects? How would you comment to that?
Yeah, I think, I used to always go by the 4Fs, and I still keep them to be fast, fluid, flexible, and focused. And I think, the agile type thinking and shorter sprints and successes, I think is going to be a big part of our new portfolio moving forward, so that we can shift and or pivot and or stop and or possibly even accelerate things much quicker than getting down, some kind of a large building and now figuring out what we need to do if all of a sudden the environment changes. So I'm a big fan of that kind of thinking anyway. And again, bringing things into kind of more manageable, and to be able to get early successes, you've got to be able to break things down like that. From a budget perspective, I think, we are like everybody else, and even other industries outside of healthcare, obviously, have been impacted, and we're thinking, what do we need to do? We are going through right now kind of more of a month-to-month rolling type of budget versus, the annual and 5-year type thing. And we'll do that for a period of time as we start to commit and generate what the next couple of years might look like, or at least now that we have exposure to the potential impact of situations like this, we need to build that kind of flexibility into, so that we can continue to deliver the services to our communities and to our patients in the most safe and secure manner, which is our utmost responsibility, and do so in a very fiscally responsible way.
Thank you for sharing.
Could you talk a little bit about the history of the hospital? And I was on the website and took a look at their origin, so just thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, it is. From my knowledge that I've obtained from being here, and this is one of the things that I think is very attractive. So SCL, SCL Health, is actually the merger of two healthcare systems. One is the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth, which was based out of Kansas, Leavenworth, Kansas. And then the other one is Exempla, which is based out of Denver. So there were assets in Colorado, assets in California, assets in Kansas, assets in Montana. And the board and the senior leadership, is my understanding, just prior from me coming here, kind of made a decision that, we want to be relevant in a few areas versus irrelevant in a lot of areas. So when you look at healthcare, you do see certain regions that those names, you know those names and you very well respect what they're doing. Then there's others that kind of act more like holding companies. They have a lot of assets in a lot of states. Might want to say very little central management or control or consistency or standardization, but there's small little pockets of that, but not as a total system. And our system made a very intentional decision to do that. So they sold off some of the assets in Kansas, sold off some of the assets in California, made several different regions. So the state of Montana is a region, the western part of the state, because of the Rocky Mountains, kind of creates a natural divide, is a region. And then the Denver area is a region. So our goal is to be very relevant in those three regions, to focus a lot of our intellectual capital and our energies into that, and not spread ourselves so thin across a bunch of different markets. And then the other thing I will say is, when you look at somebody like SCL, we still have sisters, for example, on our board. It's a faith-based organization. It's a Catholic organization, and the mission is truly to treat all God's people. It really is to take care of the underserved and the underprivileged and the poor, and to bring those into the same type of service of equity that you would want any other subset of the population to receive. So it's very nice. We start off all of our major meetings with reflections. So some of them are faith oriented. Some of them are more like business or leader type of comments, but there's always a reflection that allows you to kind of baseline yourself again. Every day I get a reflection in the email. They're always very thoughtful. Things that I've saved a lot of them, things that I've shared with other people that I want to reflect back upon over time, because they're just great things, either coming from the Bible or coming from other leadership type things. So that's kind of where we're at. I will say I was in a meeting without divulging too much information, where we're looking at moving some facilities, building some new facilities. And with one of them that we were looking at moving, one of, as you build the business case, part of the business case was you're moving to a little bit more affluent area of a population, of which then would bring you a better payer mix, better margins, all the positive things from a business aspect. And one of the sisters and the other board members at the meeting commented that that is the right thing to do to make sure that we're financially viable. However, we cannot forget the population that we're moving from. And that really just kind of touched my heart, because in my 30 years before that, we wanted our competitors to serve that population. So just, again, I think for me in my career and where I'm at in this chapter of my career, it was very nice to be able to baseline and create that foundation of why we really are here within healthcare, is to deliver those services to those populations and communities.
Craig, I love to hear that. I've been a big follower of conscious capitalism, especially over the last year or so. And I heard a phrase, it was actually a subtitle of a book called Conscious Business. And they talk about how to deliver value through values. And I think that's what you guys are doing. I applaud that.
Yeah, it's a great comment, Joe. Thanks.
Yeah. It's interesting. Now that you're out in Colorado and you don't have the humidity that we do here in Charlotte, how many other folks from Charlotte have you attracted to come out there?
Oh, there's a few. So I think right now we're somewhere sitting around 7 or 8. These are extremely talented people. I'm just honored and privileged that there's people who would want to pick up and move and come to a different part of the country to be able to work together again, allow me to serve them into their capacity. They're exemplary in their value system, in their work ethic, and their focus on contributions and delivering, and also on building networks and being collaborative. So very much engaged with a lot of our business and clinical leaders. So I'm just very privileged for that, to allow that to happen and occur. And so these people are, they're A-game people. They can go anywhere. And the fact that we were able to work together again is quite a privilege. Plus, we have some great assets that were already here that we are growing and developing, and they're just a natural fit. Everybody that I have on my team, I would want to take with me if I went somewhere. And so I'm very blessed that we have that level of maturity in a very short period of time.
The weather, as you commented before we started, it's one of the things that I think has had the most impact on you, or a big impact on you.
It is two things, the weather and the beauty. So every time I look out, to the west to see, there's still whitecaps, to see that mountain range, it's just like looking at a mural, a picture, just kind of a dream on the wall. So anytime you feel like, you look out there and it's like, oh my gosh, the beauty is amazing. And then the weather, you're right, Joe. I mean, it is, I wasn't sure about the heat, that was coming and the dryness, but the lack of insects is really attractive. And you don't walk into that wall of humidity, for so many years. And as you mentioned at the beginning, moving from the Midwest down to, the Carolinas in the South was a nice change. It was different, very nice change and very comfortable winters. But the summers are, you walk into that wall and, you kind of, your shirt and your face. And I don't sweat much to begin with, but I had plenty of soaked shirts, down in the Carolinas. So coming out here and experience it now, I'm in my second summer. When you walk out and it's 90 degrees, it's 90 degrees. It just feels a little bit like there's like a hair dryer, that's kind of like hitting on you, but not one where somebody's, shooting a wall of water at you. So I'm actually really enjoying that aspect of it. And then the winters, as you move through the different seasons, the winters are, where I'm at, are very mild. Certainly if you go up into the mountains, you can get the feet of the snow that you want. And, I'm only, in some cases, just 45 minutes away from that. But down here where I'm at, which is just a mile high, it is it's powder that falls down, and it'll accumulate, several times a year, 4 or 5. And then the air just sucks it all up in a couple of days. So it's really comfortable. I haven't worn a winter jacket during the winter here unless I go up to the mountains. And that's it. And really, when you go back to my time in the Carolina area, very similar. When I had to go up to the mountains, I got to put on my gear, but outside of that, I don't. And when you look at the mountains here, just in Colorado alone, we have 54 peaks that are 14,000 feet. And the highest peak in the whole Appalachian range is 6,900. Yeah. So I have 54 that are twice as high as the highest peak. So it almost makes you feel like mountains versus hills.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see the Rocky Mountain Range, and then you compare it to the Appalachians, there's no comparison really.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful country. My youngest loves it out there. I expect that one day she'll make the move. But we're hoping she does, and we hope she comes this direction. She lives in Minneapolis right now, but we'll see.
Minneapolis is a great town too. Very interesting. Just a lot of little natural lakes. And growing up in Michigan, being around the Great Lakes, when I went to the Carolinas, and they have several lakes there, Lake Norman, Lake Wiley. In my mind, I'm like, I grew up on Lake Erie, and it was like, those aren't lakes, those are ponds.
Those are rain puddles.
Kind of relative.
Yeah. Farm pond.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. I envy it. Last night, my wife and we have a pool in the backyard, and I walked outside. It was 9 o'clock at night, Mike, and I think it might have been close to 90 degrees still. Humidity was right up there, and it's like, wow. I mean, you have to get in the water in order to, to cool off. Except the water was already up to close to, it was like 89 degrees in the water. I'm like, okay, I like it. My wife says it's not refreshing, but you don't feel a chill when you get in. But do you see a lot of people? Do people have pools out in your neck of the woods? Or is that a common thing?
There are pools. I wouldn't say it's a lot. I agree with you. In the Carolinas, I mean, you have to dip yourself into some of that water just to escape from the air. But here, I don't see as many pools as what I would have maybe expected. But I don't know if it's because the water evaporates quicker and it's more expensive to have one. I really don't know the rationale behind it, but I don't see a lot. But all of the it's similar to many other places. All the subdivisions and many of the different public, like my gym is a Lifetime Fitness gym. They all have indoor, outdoor pools and a lot of recreational stuff. So it's very much it's an outside place to live. So everybody is out. You can't, any day of the year, no matter where I go, there's people biking and hiking, and you see them all over, and they built the infrastructure to allow that to be very convenient versus the kind of some of the tight roads and where you have to, back east, maybe have to pause while you're driving, or because there's a biker kind of in the middle of the road. Here they're all over, and but they all have their own kind of paths. So it's really kind of nice to see and to be able to do that without the anxiety or stress of automobiles, surrounding you while you're doing some of that outdoor activity.
Don't you miss palmetto bugs? I mean, come on.
Oh Lord. Yeah, it's funny. We're looking at building our first house, and looking at different houses, and one of the things in the building was an outdoor, and most of the houses are 3 levels, so they mostly do have basements. No problem. Most of the houses seem to have that kind of infrastructure, or if they're 2 levels, the basement, the first floor, all walkouts. So it's very attractive. And building a porch, it was like, you need to fence this in, and how much are screens, and it was like, we don't have screens out here. I was like, what do you mean you don't have screens? We don't have bugs, we don't have insects. I was like, I really never noticed it, but you really don't. And when you go around, nobody has them. It's all wide open, so you can be out at any point in time and not worry about insects or bugs infesting your house or infesting your
No mosquitoes
or environment. No, never ran into one yet.
Wow. I guess there's an elevation level they don't cross over, from what I understand.
I don't know. I assume they're here, but there's also, it's very wide open. And so I think if there are things, there's so much space, that they can go to versus, maybe being very attracted to a lot of trees and a lot of urban situations. You can go out and you can see for miles. Kind of like that old Who song, I can see for miles and miles and miles. It literally is very wide open and spread out.
I know my visits there in Broomfield and Littleton, because of Time Warner Telecom and Level 3, you'll see out in the distance, buildings and stuff like, oh, that's only going to be a couple minutes. Really, it could be an hour, because just the distance wise, right? I mean, it's almost like a mirage. How close they can really. The mountains look closer than they realize. Oh, that's really a 3-hour drive. 2-hour drive to get up. Look a lot closer.
Yeah, you're right, Mike.
So with all the health stuff that's going on, I'm sure that's top of mind. I know you're an influential speaker with HIMSS. How is educating the public and working with partners in healthcare and technology? How has that all changed? And from your vision, Craig, folks are looking at you for your leadership. What are some of the things that you're looking at that are going to impact healthcare and technology?
Yeah, Mike, when I look at some of the things, and this is some of, I think, the maturing of the role of the Chief Information Officer, because you have to be innovative, you have to be transformative, you have to have a digital tool belt, to bring with you. So all these different pieces kind of all fit within that scope. And also, when you go back to even the time at Charlotte, I also was, the first chairman of the Charlotte CIO Association, as well as the CIO of the Year for Charlotte. And then a few years before that was it for healthcare, for the national healthcare. So for Chime and HIMSS, I was their CIO of the Year as well. And the one thing that I learned in those several years of recognition, of which are all deserving of my team and all the work that they've done, was healthcare is not as quote unquote special in many cases what we think we are. There may be, in my mind, I could use a 10 to 15% of things that are pure within the vertical that don't really cross a lot. But most of what we do, a lot of what we do really does. And that's why I think you're seeing the opportunity for some technology companies that are coming into healthcare, the Amazons of the world and others, and the retail companies like the Walmarts and the CVS, and the Walgreens now with the big announcement, all coming in, because there are components of healthcare that are very similar to a technology company or to a large retail company. And that's the piece that they're pulling in. And so when you look at that kind of evolution, and like, you went back and mentioned like Coca-Cola bottling, for example, those relationships that we had within Charlotte were very beneficial. So I could learn from Duke Energy and from Coke and from other leading organizations and CIOs. And we actually are building something similar out here with Colorado CIO. So actually, it's not even announced yet, but this past week, I was also nominated and selected to be their first chairman for the Colorado CIO. So we started to build several months ago, an association by using Inspire CIO and bringing that kind of asset and coordination together and to build a similar type of community that we had in Charlotte. I will say when I first came out here to Denver, one of the first things that happened is the healthcare CIOs all reach out to me. We had drinks and dinner together.
Oh,
that was new, because in many cases, in many markets, the competition between those companies kind of don't allow that to occur very often. And here it was the first thing they did, just to kind of warmly welcome me together. And there's things that we actually are working on together, which is really kind of neat. Some of that paid off, during the COVID crisis. We were able to share ideas and thoughts among each other. But our community is certainly much larger than that when you look at the CIO community. So what we're doing here is doing the same thing. We're going to be expanding that Colorado CIOs, bringing them together across all different verticals and be able to share a lot of the different knowledge and intellectual capital and thought leadership, so that we can all kind of leverage each other, because we're all in it for potentially different reasons, but we're in it for, in my case, for our patients or for our community. So anything that I can imitate from others or innovate within, I take those in a heartbeat.
That's great.
So now that you're there, I mean, not that I'm suggesting you think about retirement, but it's certainly something I think about. Well, I did retire, sort of. Are you thinking that that's going to be your final stop in terms of home, and are you thinking about coming back this way, or or do you not have plans at this point?
Joe, I think it goes back to one of the things that Mike talked about at the beginning in terms of agility. The best laid plans, get destroyed. So I really don't have any plans to move. I'm very comfortable with the company that I'm with is exceptional. The teammates that I have in the C-suite are just the best that I've worked with. My team is tremendous. The other relationships we've built are great. You look at the community, at least professionally, that kind of expansion is something that we'll be doing, as I mentioned, and continuing to evolve around that. And I hope really what we do is as we've built, I think we're going to be like the 17th market for CIOs. And I think the plan by the end of next year might be around 23, 24 markets, is continuing to connect those markets. We can really kind of leverage and not only share thoughts and ideas within Colorado, but also within Charlotte or Dallas or Boston or Georgia, all these other markets where we built this kind of relationship. So, I will take wherever the Lord gives me and directs me to go. So if that's someplace else, that's some of these things won't be within my control, but the things that are within my control, I am just blessed that I am here with this company and in this part of the country. And the biggest thing that I miss are my three children who are all on the east side. So I've got one who's a resident and up at the Cleveland Clinic. Then I have two that are in the Charlotte market. But, the way things are today, digital aspects, we connect all the time. And also physically now, we see each other back and forth. There are a couple months with COVID that we all kind of laid low. But outside of that, I'm back seeing them in their places, and they're out visiting or playing to me, or we're meeting somewhere in the middle. So, family has always been number one for me. And so that's the thing that's the most important in today's world. This becomes a lot easier to connect, even though you may have some distant challenges.
Yeah, I get it. My mom is, Mike's heard me talk about this. She's 97 in August. And so we've been doing family Zoom calls the last several months, that she absolutely loves it. But it's difficult because she lives in Wisconsin, and us our being in the Carolinas makes it a little hard. And plus, you don't want to expose her to anything that she doesn't need to be exposed to. So, the technologies have really given us an opportunity to stay connected. But
It's funny.
not the same.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny you mentioned your mom because when you talked about retirement, I have no plans for retirement. I love my work. It's part of what drives me. It actually, in my case, helps define who I am and my contributions, to society. But my mom is 83, and she still works. So she's a director at a surgical center up in Michigan. And
That's fantastic.
if I have that in my future, I've got a few more chapters to write yet.
Yeah, my dad worked until his late 80s. He had his own business, and I don't have any plans on retiring either. So I've been doing my thing with Mike and consulting as well. And so my wife says, "When are you going to stop?" I'm like, maybe when I'm not breathing anymore. That might be the time.
Yeah.
So I guess, Craig, to kind of wrap things up, in regards to the industry, what's the future of telemedicine kind of look like, right? And then also, as you build teams for today's, IT teams, what are some of the skill sets that you're seeing that are important when you're building a team? Again, I know you're a hospital, so maybe not as much work from home, or maybe there is work from home compared to other businesses that are moving more to work from home. So would you mind sharing some of those thoughts that you have around telemedicine and, skill sets for teammates?
Yeah. One thing that one of my mentors in the past had taught me that I always remember, and his name was John Knox, who I actually adore, is, for every incentive, there's a de-incentive. And he's absolutely right. So when you look at something like telehealth, it's here to stay. We've all kind of really launched up our expertise. It is not at a level, what I would say, that is commercially strength yet, or industrial strength. It will get there. It'll get there soon enough. Pretty much every call so far, except this one, but that I'm on, with other people, other professionals outside of healthcare delivery, for example, there's always somebody forgetting to unmute, or their camera's not working, or there's noise in the background, or not able to connect, or they have to call in. So there's still a lot within the technology that needs to be perfected to allow it to be able to be very highly reliable. And we actually are going through, at the end of this month, our third upgrade in a few months, of which we really didn't do a whole lot here until then. I think we had 50 visits in February, and then we got up into the tens of thousands a couple months later. And learned that there's still a lot of correction that needs to be done. So we're in the process of doing that. I do think it does open up, I think, the opportunity as maybe a bridge in some cases more toward self-service and home. So as I'm able to serve you virtually, and when you not be able to having to come into maybe to the office or the facility, that also then means I need to start to give you knowledge and to give you tools in your home that I need to replicate, because I don't have that ability maybe in my office. So whether you're talking about, just simple things like even like, scales and blood pressure cuffs and all the different monitoring components, I need to move that stuff over there. And that leads you to a lot of the automation that we're seeing now with artificial intelligence and machine learning. As the machine learning continues to mature and the artificial intelligence starts to supplement a lot of the human intelligence, some of that stuff will become self-service. I really won't even need me as a provider. And that moves you into a more of a preventive, proactive wellness situation. It's kind of like your car. And now that they all have the computers in it, the role of the mechanic has changed over the last 20 years. And as opposed to him or her going in, tearing stuff apart just to diagnose what's happening, the computer kind of tells what really is happening and what you need to do or not do, and it'll correct itself. And I think we'll see a lot of this similar type of analogy happening within healthcare. If you look at the workforce, and this is going across all industries, the remote aspect, I think, is what you're highlighting of the workforce and But tell again, for every incentive, there's a D incentive. What that does is that certainly starts to bring down your cost of your expense structure of having to have parking spots and maybe offices and cubes and conference centers. It starts to reduce some of that overhead. It saves a lot of employees' time, as we know, from the commute aspect of it, things of that nature. And also then removes the geographic boundaries of the staff. So for most part, you'd have to live within 30 miles of your office to be able to really be employed and be actively coming in and intersecting back and forth. So far, my interpretation is we've kind of made a conscious effort that leadership needs to be together. We do need to have some of those informal run-ins and communications and things of that nature. So we have a certain level of and above that we want to come back into the office. And there's a few other potential expertise, but also there's many that we are not bringing back to the office unless they prefer to. So they may have a personal situation, or they may have, like in Joe's example, a mother at home instead of in Wisconsin, and he or she is in this time, maybe COVID at risk, and so we really don't want them to be interacting with other people as much. So maybe personal reason why somebody would want to come in, or somebody would want to stay home. But we have kind of made a leadership coming in, non-leadership not so much. But also what that does is that creates then your employment pool to be nationwide, if not worldwide. So when I recruit people and employ people, I don't need to, in all cases, have them be geographically close. So that increases the competition for that job. So if I'm looking for a role, and it's a remote role, 4 months ago, it may have been an on-site role. And so I needed somebody here. Now, if I've determined that's remote, I can now recruit from anywhere. And the reverse happens, right? So now one of my associates, a lot of the talent that I have, they can go work somewhere and maybe not even have to move anymore. So they don't have to have that consideration when they look at having a new job. That's the same thing with telehealth. Is it allows me to be able to spread my assets and my clinical expertise to parts of the states, or maybe in some cases parts of the country that I really don't have a physical presence. So now I can actually serve some of those patients, but on the reverse side, it allows others now to come into my markets as well. So my competition just increased because somebody now that's in Michigan with a license in Colorado can now serve the patients that right now I serve. So it works both ways, and that's where I think a lot of the digital aspects of our work, the consumerism, the retail components, really kind of expands our competition and allows us to be able to increase that access, but also allows us, it forces you to be able to be at the top of your game, which when I go back to the original, when the leadership made the decision several years ago, we want to be relevant in a few markets and irrelevant in a lot. To be relevant is important, and that's going to be part of our key to success.
That's cool. Well, thank you, Craig, for everything that you've done, especially in Charlotte. You have tons of followers and admirers, so thank you for what you're doing with healthcare, and it's great to see you, what you're doing in Colorado. Is there anything that you'd like to plug in regards to things you're doing for the hospital, or things that you're doing in the community?
Well, there's several things that are been important. Certainly, first and foremost, SCL Health. It's a brand that is very recognizable within our communities, but maybe not so much, across the country. But given the talent and given the work that we've done here, we do tend to be nationally recognized in a lot of our different services, as well as some of the things that, whether it's some of the system services areas, as well as the clinical areas. And you'll see us, in my scope of responsibilities, certainly influencing what's happening across the country as well as the others that I mentioned. Secondly, I would say, those partnerships that we've developed have been tremendous. I would like to, highlight them again. So Google and being a great partner of ours, Salesforce and being a great partner, ServiceNow being a great partner, Oracle being a great partner, and naturally Epic being a great partner. The way that they have come to the table and sat with us and worked with us, and we've aligned our visions and our strategies and our work together. So to me, it's simply to kind of plan the work and work the plan. and they have really come to the table for us. And they've also come to us also during the COVID, where there was a period of time, and this still continues, where there was a financial hit. Many companies, including those that I mentioned, have come to help us to get through this kind of struggle. And that's a true partnership. And it's not always going to be green and rosy and moving forward. And the last thing I would say is just, my team. My team is, they're kind of my professional family. So family is the most important. My three boys is the reason for my existence. However, my professional family is very talented, and I'm just very proud and happy to be able to serve them.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Joe, any final words that you'd like to share?
I want to extend my thanks to Craig for spending time with us on this podcast. And I know all our Charlotte viewers and listeners will be excited to hear from you, Craig. So thanks again. Appreciate your time, and stay safe, and we'll see you down the road.
Okay, Joe, Chief, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Craig.
All right, see you guys later. Bye.